been watching sports for a long time, though, over 30 years, pretty obsessively. I think I know what a championship team looks like. That doesn't mean I'm guaranteed to be right, but I think I know what a championship team looks like. Someone can make the case that Denver looks like a championship team. This is just my opinion watching Miami. I think this is a championship team. I don't think they're going to lose. So this could be like the Kurt Schilling quote, mystique and aura are dancers at a nightclub, not like real things, like he famously said about Yankee Stadium. And then they did in fact exercise those demons in 2004. This is kind of a mystique and aura narrative type bet for me. And I acknowledge that for sure. Betting the Miami Heat. I think the Heat are going to win the series. I will definitely bet Miami to cover the spread in game number 1. And I do think the one thing that quantifiable advantage that Miami has, maybe you could say Spoelstra over Michael Malone, but we like Michael Malone. And I guess the 2015 Warriors kind of bucked this trend. Also, Kyrie and Kevin Love both got hurt in that finals, where this is Denver's first like real like dance in prime time, like in the NBA finals here. Not just as a franchise, but with this current iteration and group of players. Have been to the playoffs, obviously, a number of times, but have never made it this far before. Whereas with Miami, they've been knocked down a number of times, keep getting back up. 2020 in the bubble, losing the NBA Finals to a much better Lakers team, but Butler goes nuclear in a couple games. They end up losing that series in 6. They obviously take Boston to 7 last year, lose game 7 at home. And now famously, those Butler quotes in the press conference are starting to resurface like, we're going to be back in the same situation last year. And Butler, a soothsayer himself, proving to be prophetic. So I think that's the one quantifiable edge that you could maybe say Miami has, is that they've been to this spot before. They've been close to the top of the mountain and have been knocked down, and maybe that'll help give them the edge a little bit. I don't have a ton of like great basketball opinion to offer in terms of like, well, I think Bam's going to stop Jokic. No, he's not.
Right.
Jokic is going to carve that ass up. Of course he's going to. He's going to have a big series. I watch Miami and I see a team that I want to bet on. I'll bet Miami in game 1, Ken. I'll bet the Miami Heat to win the series.
The price is really funny because it just goes back to this like question, and I'm going to keep asking this the more we do shows about all sports, because I just think it's interesting. Like, what do you value? Where, you know, like the market, the betting market for all sports is going to be like heavily weighted in regular season performance. Like, that's what we had. That was the games that were played. And that's why, because I'm sure like sometimes I'm sure you have the same thing. You'll like not explain betting stuff, but somebody will ask you, somebody who maybe doesn't bet a lot will be like, oh, like what's the spread in that game? Or like who's favored to do this? And you'll explain it and they'll be like, what? That's crazy. And you have to be like, no, because it's like the regular season. Like I was at this family cookout and it was like, what's the spread in game 7? And I was like, like Celtics by like 7.5. And they were like, what? Like Heat. We love the Heat. And I was like, why? And like, I was like, okay, like, why do you like the Heat? I was like, I don't like Boston, but like, tell me why you like the Heat. And it just, I had to be like, well, you know, like in all the Boston games, this was kind of the market and it's not going to change that much just because of like, there isn't a lot of reason to change it necessarily. So like my first thing here is just, look, I agree with the series price to the extent that I think Denver is very likely to win. I don't think they're more likely to win than this, at least not by a lot. And I agree that Denver should be a really big favorite. Can Miami win? Sure. But I think the really interesting thing to me is like all the ways that this is not like the other series for Miami and how they will have to come up with something different to overcome them. And they have the best coach and they have a really good player, but it won't be the same. So like, for example, like the Celtics were basically like historically bad in that series at shooting threes. And I think what that masked when you saw those numbers was that they were still getting a lot of wide open 3-pointers. Like they were still getting, though. They weren't like shooting contested shots all the time. In game 7, they were. And Denver is going to score in this series. There's basically nothing Miami can do to stop Denver from scoring. That's their problem. Now, the good news for Miami is because of how they played against Milwaukee and the Knicks and Boston, they've shown an ability to score with anybody too. That's the most remarkable part. They shoot 50% from 3 like every game. They did it again last night. Well, the Celtics were 0 for 11 in the first quarter. And the Heat were 50%, I think, with like 5 minutes to go in the third. They still made that many shots. So I think I don't think this is like Boston. I don't think this is like, it's made a little bit like Milwaukee. I don't think it's like the Knicks series at all. The Nuggets are gonna score. They just are. And there's nothing Miami can do about it. But Miami's path to victory is the same thing that's gotten them past Milwaukee and Boston, everything. Their ability this postseason to be like Denver and make every shot and like get a lot of contributions from a lot of players, especially shooting from 3. So if they can just do the same thing, they're live. you just kind of like wonder, okay, against a different opponent, different matchup, different coach, everything, can they do it again? Maybe, but I don't view this series as a great betting opportunity, even though I'm sure some people do.
So, well, if it's not Denver for the series, maybe it's Denver in game one. We'll give you the opportunity to say that if indeed that's a bet for you. But what is like your overall like handicapping strategy here? What is your betting strategy for the series? Like, is it Denver in game one? Are you betting finals MVP? Like, what are your bets going to be for the NBA finals, if any at all?
Yeah, I think the market is onto this. This is not, the idea that there's a huge advantage for the Nuggets in game one is, I think, reflected in a price. And, I think I was hopeful. I was yesterday, like basically when the series was over yesterday, you want to try to fire a bet. You want to kind of get involved in the finals right away, get best of the price. And it moved fast. And I kind of sat there and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hope that the Nuggets come out with a little rust and maybe they lose game one and everybody overreacts and Jimmy Butler's doing it again and blah, blah, blah. And I'll get it like a beautiful buy spot on the Nuggets. And maybe that materializes, but I don't think it will. And I think realistically, I'm going to hope that if rust impacts the Nuggets at all, it'll be early in the game and they're going to be a great entry point on Nuggets second half for game one. But ultimately, I would expect that they should have about a 75-80% win probability considering who's on the floor and just in general the situational advantage. And I think, fair price on the side should be about 10. So, small advantage, but you're asking you to lay 15 cents on top of 8.5 points. So, going to try to find a better in-game entry for game one. And I'm going to take a little Nuggets sweep. Again, like they have the constitution to do it. They have the talent to do it. The fact that they've gotten all of this time to rest and have, the additional time in between games. There are not enough paths here for the Heat to be competitive for me to take them seriously in terms of, winning the series, but even more so just even winning a game. So this is a decent opportunity, I think, to fire a Nugget sweep.
Is this a finals where like a crazy player can win MVP, even if the crazy player is just Jamal Murray, the second best player on Denver? We have like a minute left for this.
Yeah, I would have liked to have made the argument a little bit more sincerely if we didn't just see as good as a chance as anyone was going to have of stealing the award. Twice in a row, I guess, with Caleb Martin not quite getting it from Jimmy and then Jamal Murray not getting it from Jokic in the Western Conference Finals. If you break down the advanced statistics of the Western Conference 4 games we had, I mean, Jokic and Murray were they were about equally impactful. It was as narrow a margin as I ever would have believed between those two players, and the vote went overwhelmingly Jokic. I think that's speaks to people's just mindset in general of maybe some of the MVP shadow discussion and him kind of taking his game to another level. These playoffs, it's all on paper. It's all there for you. I think a fun way to play it with a little bit of chaos beyond. If this is a short series, you're right, something crazy could happen. But I don't think it's the MVP market. It's probably the player, the most points market. I can you can see pretty clearly a guy like Murray or even a guy like Michael Porter Jr. catching fire from three and being the leading scorer in a short series here. Jokic gets the MVP, but something like Michael Porter Jr. 40-1 for most points scored, I think is a fun live bet. It's a wild one, and I think ultimately I don't think anyone's 99% of the outcomes here with Denver winning the series. Jokic is getting your MVP, but points is wide open as far as I could tell you, or at least a lot more so than what gets voted on. So that would be a fun way to attack if you were looking for a little bit higher, try to capture some variance.